What's up, YouTube? This is your boy Ben Mahari here, representing Mahari Nation Sports Podcast. I hope you guys had a good weekend and hope y'all have been staying safe out there this summer. Now, I want to particularly do a video about this whole, I guess you could say this whole war between old school and new school NBA fans. And I've been seeing that a lot, especially here in these YouTube streets between predominant, the old school channels that rebel against the NBA game of today and the new school fans that rebel against some of the things that happened in the old NBA. And coming from a perspective from both sides, I can see different sides of the argument that that are legitimate, and then there's some that are just utterly ridiculous. Now, I want to make this very, very clear. This is particularly my own 2 cents. This is just my opinion alone. And if you have a disagreement with it, just disagree respectively and explain why you disagree with it. If you kind of try to come across all emotional and try to, rebel and try to say some things that are very outlandish, I'm not going to listen. I'm not going to respond to your comment, because what I'm trying to establish here is a basically a discussion where we can discuss things in more of a debate, but more of a respectful matter where we're coming from all different perspectives. Now, with that out the way, let's get into the video at hand here. Now, I've been particularly been appalled by the amount of videos that I've been seeing out there, particularly from the new school channels that always defend the new school brand of NBA basketball, and then I see the other channels that basically defend the old school brand of NBA basketball, and each of them have a lot of legitimate points. Now, I'm gonna break this down in a very intellectual type of way where people can understand both sides of the fence. Now, I'm gonna start with the old school. For me, I was born in 1992. And so, unfortunately, I don't have a full in-depth knowledge about how things were in the 70s. I should take that back, from the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, and early 90s. I kind of watched basketball from midway from the mid to the late 90s and all the way towards the 2000s and beyond. Now, I will say this though. Legends like Bird, Magic, Jordan, Pippen, Olajuwon, okay, those, and even Barkley too, Robinson, let me think, Ewing, okay, a young Shaq, all right, Grant Hill. I mean, think about this for a moment. We're coming from a different era of basketball where you know what the old school prefers is a game where everything is a physical type of game, where defenses are legitimately tough, where you basically you have to pay a price when you try to go drive into the basket, and the role of the enforcer was much more significant back then. You guys had legitimate enforcers like the Rick Mahorns or the Charles Oakley, the Xavier McDaniels, or Anthony Masons, the Davis boys, both Antonio and Dale Davis, from those great Indiana Pacer teams, all right, that played with Reggie Miller. You know, the thing with basketball was back then is that it was much more of a team orientated type of game where, even when you have legitimate superstars on your team, there's always a concept of playing together as a team and being able to sacrifice, one another for the sake of the goal of winning a championship. Unfortunately, there are certain superstars that had great success, but were not able to achieve the long-term goal of a championship because, one, through the dominance of the Celtics, the Lakers, the Bulls, um, the Rockets back then. You know what I mean? Those are the kind of things where you talk about guys like the Malones, the Stocktons, the Barkleys. Also, the idea that your legacy is not complete without winning a championship. Listen, there have been a lot of great players back then that never won championships. Dominique is one of them. All right. Dominique, as great of a scorer he never won a championship because look at the era that he was playing in. Right. So I can understand what a lot of the old school people have a problem with when new school fans that never watched these kind of games, that the only thing that they present, the only thing that has been presented to them is obviously the new school way of games where basically it's about ball handling, shooting, the more the emphasis of the point guard or the two guards, dominating the game on the outside. All right. That's where a lot of the old school fans have a problem with, because what they believe in their minds is they believe that, listen, you're disrespecting the game, the people that built this game. And I also failed to mention those great centers back then, guys like, George Mikan, guys like Bill Russell, Wilt, Kareem, all right, and even Bob Lanier, all right, Robert Parrish, and I can keep going down the list. There was more of a concept of starting your team with a dominant big man. It wasn't until, obviously, when Magic and Bird came into the league, and then when Jordan was drafted in '84, that basically the concept of building a championship eventually changed. The point I'm making here is that as society and as life continues to progress forward, things change, and you have to either adapt or you get consumed by your old ways, and it's not always going to work out for you. And I tend to believe that a lot of the old school fans are rebellious to the fact that, listen, we appreciate the new game, but we take great offense of the disrespect. But let's go on the flip side to it. The new school fans are coming in with a different attitude that, listen, we respect the old school people and what they brought in. But when you come across and try to disrespect how we play or how the game has changed now, they take great offense to that. And there's certainly a lot of superstars even today that are a bit thin-skinned. Guys like KD, guys like maybe LeBron to a certain extent a bit, and then also Kyrie that pretty much cannot handle the level of criticism that is borne on them. A lot of it unfair, of course, but some of it fair. But the thing is that you can't always blame the player specifically for how the game is adapted. And I'm going to explain to you in this final detail. Remember how the NBA took away hand checking, how they took away, zone defenses. It was done for a specific reason. All right. It was done to try to increase scoring, but also, and this is something that LVZ can even touch upon this too, and he touches upon this a lot when he talks about basketball. The reason why they took away zone defenses is because they were made for one specific purpose, to try to benefit from the main top superstar that is pushing the brand of the league. Guys like the Magics and the Birds. What happened? They basically brought in the flagrant foul. They were basically, anytime you go into the paint, when you get hit hard, there's a price to pay of getting hit that hard. And then when Jordan came in and started becoming the dominant force, what did they do? Took away zone defenses where you can't double team off the ball anymore, what they call illegal defense back then. All these little things, and even taking away the ability to basically bump guards off of their position, where now in the NBA of today, that's not even allowed anymore. Now it's pretty much made the game much more of an open court style. All right. And that's where a lot of the old school fans have a problem with it. But at the same time, a lot of the new school fans, they'll think of it like, man, we can still play in that kind of era. You know what I mean? And some of them may come across as a little bit ignorant, but if we're really being honest with ourselves, there are certain players in the new school generation of basketball, guys like LeBron James, that could actually thrive in the old school way, including Giannis Antetokounmpo too. All right, guys that drive the ball consecutively and wouldn't mind, being confrontational and taking the punishment against the top enforcers. Because let's just be real about a lot of them enforcers. Their job was to basically do the rebounding, tough defense, but also set a tone for the team where there's a price to pay when you go into the basket. And unfortunately, in today's NBA, it's the role of the enforcer doesn't exist anymore. The same way that has happened in the National Football League. You remember back then, you had the enforcer as safety. Guys like the Jack Tatums of the Oakland Raiders, Ronnie Lott of the San Francisco 49ers, and then obviously Rodney Harrison of my generation from San Diego and from New England. All right. What is the role of the enforcer now as safety these days? Is to play basically the backline coverage at this point, and also drill wide receivers in the middle of the field if they try to go in with the slant and knock them on their heads. Well, because of the fact that more people are more concerned about CTE and brain injuries, the role of enforcer is not there anymore. In the NBA, the flagrant foul was instituted to make sure nobody gets hurt in midair, and then you also got the clear path foul, which means that anytime a guy's trying to get to the basket and you're basically trying to stop him, if you try to hack him or try to tackle him in any way, that's basically a clear path foul, which could result into a flagrant foul as well. So there's certainly a lot of different things that that the new school has that a lot of the old school heads kind of resenting the fact that they never had those kind of more of the relaxed version of the rules back then. Because I can remember one time when Wilt Chamberlain met Michael Jordan for the first time during the All-Star weekend in Cleveland in '97. He pretty much made it clear that back then, when he was the most dominant superstar in the league back then in his heyday, they made the rules difficult for him to score and do all the things that he could do offensively and defensively. But when Michael came in, all the rules changed to pretty much benefit him. And that's what pretty much has been what it is. And I think that a lot of times the old school heads tend to forget the fact that their top beneficiaries basically benefited from some relaxed rules, and some of the other top stars never had those kind of opportunities. And so a lot of the new school guys are coming in like, listen, we can't control what the rules state because the NBA pretty much states the rules for us. All we can play is just the rules that have been given to us. And there's been a lot of, friction between that. And a lot of the old school fans can sometimes get, slighted in the fact that they're playing in more of a softer, relaxed version of the NBA than compared to what they seen back then. And I come across from both sides of the fence. Now, if you ask me what I prefer, I prefer a balance. All right. I appreciate the old school game, but I also respect the new version of the game, because at the end of the day, you can have your criticism of both sides of the fence all you want to. But the bottom line is the new version of the NBA is different. And this is their generation. This is their time. And however they want to play it, that's how they're going to play it. And there's only there's only two ways you can accept this. You can just appreciate it and just accept it for what it is, or you just don't have to watch it anymore. It's that simple. And so I watch it because, it's basketball. But there are times where I feel that there are a lot of times where there's certain calls or certain things in a game, or when players take things a little bit too harder than others, that really just shakes my head a lot of the time. But I have to remind myself that, hey, this is their generation. This is what they want to do. And as much as we pretty much can hate it outside of that, they are the ones that have to play 82 games a year and pretty much go through the grind of an NBA season from November all the way towards, April or May. And for the elite teams they basically are trying to make a run to the finals all the way out to June and July. So, at the end of the day, we have to be very, very careful of how we, dish out the criticism of it. There's a point where we can criticize a player for what they decide to do for free agency or what decision they make on the basketball court. But then there's a point where we're taking it too far and we're basically crapping on a player because we just don't like him personally. And I see that a lot with a lot of the LeBron James haters and a lot of the Michael Jordan lovers. You know what I mean? And I'm an MJ fan. But even I sometimes myself, like, listen, as much as I respect both those guys, they're not always perfect in their own way. So let's be careful of how we praise and how we criticize players, and try to give a full in-depth analysis before we jump the gun on our criticism of both the old school and the new school sides. So that's just my 2 cents, and that's how I kind of interpret things. You know what I mean? So I'm anxious to see what you guys think. Do you guys believe that the criticism of the old school or the new school brand of basketball is justified, unfair, or balanced out? How do you guys view this whole gap between the old school and new school generation of basketball players and fans? I'm anxious to see what you guys think. So let me know what you think in the comment section below, and hopefully I can do another video where I can try to expand this a bit further. But hopefully this video can lead to something where we can finally, discuss about what we think of basketball from both the old school and the new school sides. All right. But with that being said, I appreciate you guys listening to the video, and hopefully we can continue this conversation in the near future. And with that, I'm out. Peace.